Fantastic. Thank you so much for all those who are continuing to stay with us. For those of you who have just joined us, my name is Melanie Nerona. I'm a Senior Manager of Policy and Insights at Economist Impact. And I'm pleased to be leading the next session on governing digital trade platforms. Now, over the course of this morning, we've heard so much about the potential for digitization of trade, the potential of digital trade. But I think ensuring that we have international coordination, that there's a framework for governance is imperative. And I think is without which we will not see digital trade accelerate at the desired pace. So to tell us more about the need for and the progress on international frameworks, please welcome Anna Jobin-Brett, Secretary at the United Nations Commission on International Trade. Please, Anna, thank you so much. Please let's give her a warm round of applause. Thank you. Welcome, Anna. We just have 20 minutes, and I have so many questions for you. But I think let's start with something simple. How would you define digital trade? So what are some of the technologies that are providing new opportunities for international digital trade?
Well, that's a very good question, and it's a good question for the ones like me that are lawyers. What we like most of all is to have clear definitions. So we are indeed, and that's why I'm very glad to take part in this conference, in trade in transition. And we have transitioned from trade as we knew it for centuries into e-commerce about 30 years ago. And now we're transitioning from e-commerce into digital trade. So what are the ingredients that make it from electronic commerce into digital trade? I think there are two aspects to that. And we see that there are really two pillars in the digital economy. You have what you call the data economy. So the data is becoming a new commodity that is being traded. And that, of course, generates a completely different way of trading and legal questions and issues of certainty about the legal transactions. And the other aspect is, of course, the platform economy. And what we see now is that trade is actually run by and through platforms. So you're talking about technologies, and that is the interesting aspect to it, because indeed, digital trade means that there is more and more technology and less human action. So there is less and less of a human being pushing a button or signing a document or stamping forms, and more is being done by the technologies. Now, the whole issue is to not get carried away or scared by these technologies, because they're mainly there to support and service, but also to see how they disrupt trade. So they come with a lot of opportunities, but also a couple of challenges. And these technologies are clearly, artificial intelligence, data as the source for artificial intelligence, the blockchain that we heard about earlier, which obviously comes with a lot of opportunities because it creates the certainty that we're all striving for in a perfect legal environment for trade, where we actually want to have certainty about the authenticity of documents. This is something that the blockchain enables you to get. But then you also have the disruptive parts that, for example, are generated by what we call the digital assets,
right.
All this tokenization. So you will be earning a portfolio of digital goods, digital assets that will be held by the blockchain. And at the end of the day, for us lawyers, but also for the common customers or users, is what do I actually own?
Right.
What is this, who owns what, and how can this then come into play in an insolvency proceeding? You know, what are these digital assets that a company owns? What is their value? Can they be used as collateral for finance? So they're really as I said at the beginning, lots of opportunities that make, through the technologies, through these digital technologies, trading a lot easier and more secure and faster, of course.
Right.
But on the other hand, you have some challenges that come from these new players, these new commodities, and the new actors.
Fantastic. I think there's a lot of components to this, and data and the platform economy are two really important components. Anna, can you tell us a little bit more about the initial work that's being done on the regulatory framework for cross-border data transactions?
Well, cross-border data flows have been one of the issues being discussed globally in international trade for many years. What we see now, of course, is an acceleration because data, which, you know, for laypersons is nothing more than information, right. But data has become valuable, value intrinsically, but also there is a data value chain. So the more data is being processed, the more it gains value. And all of this, of course, generates issues about access to data, which is key when nowadays you want to develop artificial intelligence and applications of artificial intelligence. You need to have access to data. And so making data available across borders, even if physical borders don't mean much in the digital world, right. Is really key. And as well as it's key to see where this data comes from, where the value is generated, and how it's being used ultimately. So this is really I would say that the most a really key issue currently in terms of international discussions is to create certainty also for the trading of data. And if you think, for example, that you have now data exchanges, you have in Shanghai this Shanghai Data Exchange, which is sort of a mega stock market of data. You have data exchange platforms that are trading data as we were trading wheat or bread. So all of this requires that we rethink the legal framework around it to make sure that these transactions can happen, because they're important. They're important for developing countries to also bridge this digital divide that we're all talking about.
That's right. And
also the ensure that, you know, these data transactions can happen with certainty.
So what does that entail? Is it defining who owns the data, defining the value created from it, creating, again, more definitions,
yes.
and therefore trying to create a framework in which all of this can take place?
Clearly. I mean, we have, for example, in UNCITRAL a convention on the international sale of goods. What we're thinking about is, or what the Commission will be looking into, is to have an international convention on the sale of data. Right. Because it creates rights, obligations on the seller, on the buyer, liability issues, traceability, transparency, all these issues that are necessary for an enabling framework. I'm not talking about putting rules on top of or having adding rules over existing rules, but more on the enabling and the trustworthiness of this business on data.
Great. Okay. You mentioned the platform economy just now as well, and the role of platforms as an intermediary for trade. Can you tell us a little bit more about what this entails and the need for governance with digital platforms?
Yeah, that's the platform, as I mentioned, is really the second pillar of the digital economy. Are these platforms, and they are a new beast, if you want, in the zoo of international trade. And they play a very, yes, they play a very crucial role at various levels. A first one is in terms of identification. In many regions, you are given a digital identity by the government. And this digital identity is what allows you to trade digitally, remotely and digitally. But in other areas of the world, in other, I would say, legal cultures or government cultures, this identity is given to you by the platform. It is Facebook that will say who you are as the buyer and who you are as the seller. So there is a complete new player that is coming into a trust relationship between seller and buyer that has already evolved a lot because of the remote character, but now you have an intermediary which you know, comes with its additional services, but also with its additional liabilities and issues. One of them is, of course, as I said, the digitalization or the digital identity. Another one is probably the dispute resolution aspect of it, because we hear a lot about these digital platforms where they have their own grievance mechanisms, they have their own dispute resolution system, and you even have, to the extent now, dispute resolution platforms that offer dispute resolution services, whether arbitration or mediation services, on the platform, on a platform. Is this
mainly with smart contracts, or are you talking broader than that?
No, I think broader than that. It's really a new service which, instead of being offered through arbitration not in a courtroom, but in a meeting room with an arbitrator and the two disputing parties, now you have the platform that is offering that completely online. And that makes it, of course, yet another additional opportunity, because it goes a lot faster. You can imagine that when you have issues arising in the digital world, you want a very quick resolution. You cannot wait for 3 years until a tribunal has deliberated, and then it goes to appeal, and then to cassation, and then comes back. So you want something that goes quick, but you also have to make sure that the fundamentals of due process, of party equality, of fairness are still there. And with these new players, including in dispute resolution, you see that there are a number of challenges that are coming up where you say governance, I would say at least some common understanding, some common fundamental standards or fundamental principles have to remain there in order to ensure that the same services are provided and that the trust can be there.
Absolutely, absolutely. So not an easy one for sure. How does the work that you're doing complement what's already being enshrined in regional trade agreements? Does it complement? Is it aligned with that, or are you going in a different direction?
Oh no, it's completely aligned, and we're absolutely going in the same direction, in the sense that we are really at the, I would say, at the floor level or at the grassroots level. We are making sure that the transactions can take place and that we talk the same language and that the same standards are applicable. So when you have governments entering, for example, into a digital cooperation chapter in a free trade agreement, which is, you know, one of the new elements of this free trade cooperation, digital cooperation means that you have to have common standards. So what are they turning to? UNCITRAL standards, which are the ones, which is the commonly used legal language among the traders in the digital economy. So no, 100%, we are really there to provide the infrastructure, if you allow me, the one which is really behind the scene.
That's right.
And then let trade thrive.
That's fantastic, because I imagine it would be so difficult for companies operating within these regions to then align as well with other international frameworks if they were different. And you're seeing that a little bit on the ESG space. So I think this alignment from the beginning is so important. I also want to ask you about, are there risks of people or countries being left behind or left out of the system, especially developing nations? So how do we bridge the digital divide there?
Yeah, you're very right. I mean, being a part of the United Nations, being a legislative body of the General Assembly, in fact, we are very aware and cognizant of the challenges that all this digital buzz is creating. It's creating lots of opportunities, but it comes also with lots of challenges. And the biggest challenge is, of course, to have a digital divide, that a gap that is broadening instead of being narrowed. And one of the fundamental needs is really to have at least a common understanding at the grassroots levels, as I was saying, so that we speak the same language, and that traders and economic operators who want, for example, to buy data from the Shanghai stock market or from somewhere in Connecticut in the United States can do it with the same certainty and the same protection, and can have access to this data. Because the data is what is going in turn to enable them to develop their artificial intelligence solutions, their improvements to trade, and their development of this new industrial revolution that we are currently living.
Absolutely. And, you know, we're running out of time, and I'm keeping an eye on the clock there, and I'm sure we could talk about this for much, much longer. But I think I just want to get your final thoughts on how do we future-proof international standards? Technology is changing so fast, and we just heard in the previous panel as well that by the time we design the policies, then agree on it, implement it, it takes such a long time. And then already, and that would create the situation where you have countries being left behind, you have people being left behind. So how do we future-proof these, or at least stay ahead of some of these technology trends?
Well, you're putting the finger right on what is central for us, which is a core principle of UNCITRAL, is what we call technological neutrality. Mm-hmm. All our texts, all our instruments are technologically neutral, which means that whatever technology is being used, we're never going to develop a text, for example, on a certain application of the blockchain. We're going to look at the blockchain simply as one of the enabler of other aspects of an international transaction or an effect of the blockchain, like on insolvency. But we're not going to look at the blockchain as technology, and we're not going to develop a text which is based on a particular technology, because that is a recipe for disaster, as you say rightly, especially nowadays. You can start working on something. Given the pace at which we work, you know, we are an intergovernmental body, so everything takes time. So by starting to work on something, the technology would already be obsolete when we come up with our text. So that would be really not the best way of servicing the international trading community.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, it goes back to defining owners, defining what they can do, defining value, but not defining the rules or the medium by which they engage, right? Yes. So just the broader rules for engagement, maybe.
Exactly. It's really demystifying the technology, saying the technology is there to help, to provide a service. So we include it into the framework that is affected by this technology, but we don't focus on the technology.
I see.
Because that's not what. That is not a good service to the community if we did that.
That's right. And again, like I said, I could talk to you for much, much longer.
Me too.
This is a space that we're watching very closely at Economist Impact. Again, I think creating that enabling environment, as you said, so that services trade can accelerate. And I think that's one of the most important trends that we're going to see going forward, and something I hope to touch on in my next panel as well. But thank you so much, Anna. Please give Anna a warm round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.